One of the most valuable skills that the most senior planners and controllers have in the world is accelerating a project. And the reason why it's one of the most valuable skills is because one, it can get senior management out of very tricky situations. And two, depending on how the contracts of the projects are set up, it can make a lot of money. Getting managers out of sticky situations and making money are very high valuable outcomes, hence why it is a high value skill set. I would highly advise that anyone going on their career journey investigates acceleration of projects. This course and the Nodes and Links AI platform can set you up very well for that journey. Enjoy. I was once told that there are only two ways to accelerate a project. You crash the critical path until you hit a subcritical path and then you keep crashing, so deterministic, or you change uncertainty and risk, which is stochastic, it's probabilistic. There's many techniques under that about how you can crash a critical path and how you can change probabilities, but all roads lead to Rome, Rome being deterministic and probabilistic, stochastic. In this course, I'm going to talk about both of these things. Paths is obviously the thing you look at when you're looking at deterministic, and risk, QSRA, and AI is what you look at in the second. What I would like to advise that you do is to understand what is most appropriate for your project. There are some projects where the contractual dates are all deterministic, so for the vast majority of instances, the deterministic path method is the best. But there's a large majority of projects where there is risk on the delivery partner or the client, and or the actual stochastic methods are embedded in the contracts themselves. Either scenario, it's wise to look at risk and use artificial intelligence. So with that, we'll dive into paths and take it from step one. So the simplest method of project acceleration is by analyzing the critical and subcritical paths and figuring out how we can do it faster. Analyzing is something that a computer can do. Figuring out how to do it faster is something that requires human input. To find this, what we do is we go to Schedule and Paths. And this is the milestone that we've analyzed together previously, M4048, though it could be anything like the end date of the project. The most critical path of this has 4 days of free float. The second has 5 days of free float. What we would look to do under these circumstances is look to see, well, can we actually push that free float back? So we can see here that this is the final milestone. There's an activity straight behind it. And then this is a finished start here, but this is a finished start as well. We'd look to see if we can compress this gap. Whether or not we can compress this gap, I don't know. I don't know this project. This is for the individuals on the project to advise if this is possible. If we compress this by over a day, this will become the most critical path. And this is much more complex, where we'd need to start at the end and go through how we're going to pull this entire path back here, up this, and maybe it would require some replanning. So we actually break out the interconnections, or it would require that we work double shifts so that we increase the working time in the calendar. So we've got weekends, etc. There are many techniques that we could use, but fundamentally we go one path at a time and look how we can compress those. And that requires a conversation in most parts with the project team. The next thing we can do is start to look at the risk analysis, i.e. the stochastic or the probabilistic analysis of the project's completion. Now, what I've got here is the analysis that we performed previously on how to compare an update / review a schedule. And I've analyzed for planned completion for the P80 for all risk drivers on version 8. Now, what we're looking at here is the difference in the P curves. Now, what we would do in reality is we would have our schedule, we would then propose a change, and that change is usually driven by risk drivers. So we would, for example, given that all of these activities are driving most of the risk from duration uncertainty, we would look to implement actions that make these activities more certain. For example, what I would do is say, well, what if I could reduce the duration uncertainty by 50% of all of these activities. What I'd do is I'd note them down, I'd go into the QRA analysis, I'd make those adjustments on the inputs, I'd then rerun the analysis, I'd then compare the different p-curves. And dependent on how much the p-curves have changed on the given position I want and the overall position, which is the sum under the graph, then I'd know how much I've accelerated my project. This is not an exhaustive lesson about how to use a QSRA to accelerate a project. There are individuals trained in QSRA who will know exactly which techniques to use, but you can use all of those techniques in the Nodes and Links AI system, and they are incredibly fast to use. It is some simple button clicks and some simple downloads, and you'll have the results that you wish. The final capability in acceleration is to use artificial intelligence. Now, this artificial intelligence system, which is in AI Predict and Mitigation, does two things. Number one, if you haven't run a QSRA analysis or risk analysis, it will automatically run one based on the recommendations for duration uncertainty that it has learned from the past data of the project and from the database that we have provided it with. Number two, it will shorten activities, so it will take their duration and it will shorten them and simulate across a large number of simulations what that impact will be. From that point number two, it will make recommendations. So we've got a recommendation 1 and a recommendation 2 that says 48 days. Now in this recommendation 2, it's taken all critical path activities and it has shortened them all by 50%. And if we're shortening them all by 50%, the overall P80 deliverable of the program accelerates by 48 days. And we can see which activities are driving most of this. So we can see that this, and this are driving the vast majority. If we take those off, we can see that this activity actually makes no impact at all. These only make very small impacts. What we can do is a number of things here. We could create new opportunities ourselves in the top right. So I can click on New Opportunity, and it will enable me to run a new scenario. All I do is I select the activities I care about, and I've got my advanced search function again. So these can be targeted. For example, I've spoken with the construction director, and he thinks, let's actually do this live. I've spoken with the construction director, and he thinks that there's an opportunity to accelerate non-critical path activities, such as, well, these all seem to be on the critical path. Let's do critical path activities of here, 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 and here. Those can be accelerated. And they can be accelerated by, let's say, 60%, 40%, 20%, and 10%. I'm going to call this construction here. All I have to do is click Run New Opportunity, and it'll run that scenario for us. We then only have to wait a couple of seconds, and it'll take us back to the original screen. It will prep the analysis. It could, depending on how big the program is, it might take a couple of minutes, but in this sense, it was completed that quickly in just a couple of seconds. And then we can dive into the analysis. So I've no idea what these results are going to be, so we're going to see them together for the first time. So a gain of 19 days is what we've got. Almost all of the contribution comes from this activity, which actually has a planned duration of 9 days. But if we shorten it by 60%, which would be 6 days, we actually get 67% of 19 days is around 13 days. That's how much uncertainty is lying around this one. And we can see that these two provide, this shortening of 10 days is not worth it. It doesn't provide us a gain. What we are able to do as well is we're able to download that list so we can take it away and analyze it ourselves. In terms of the workflow that I'd personally use this for, I'd go paths. Then I'd go into AI prediction and mitigation and run scenarios so I can very, very quickly understand which activities I should be targeting. And then I would go and properly do this in the risk section, and I would manually adjust it so that I understand all of the inputs that are going in and the outputs I'm getting out. What mitigation does is it saves you a large amount of time isolating the activities that you should be looking at to accelerate your program.